Hey guys, Woods Farm here, just working on the Kubelwagen. I'm going to start making the videos progress a little faster. If you've been watching, you've kind of got an idea how I fabricate things. You know, whether it be welding with the drill press, how I use the angle grinders, the chop saw, all that kind of stuff. You got a good idea of what I'm doing. So I'm going to kind of just pick up the pace with the videos and just kind of give you the highlights as I progress. So I'm starting to work on this rear support, which kind of is part of the whole framework, and I've got that set up and tacked in place. It's not welded completely in, just so I can make sure everything is square and lined up, and then I'll go back and weld it permanently once I'm happy. And I just worked on this upper support here. This kind of forms the back seat. You can see how it's on an angle, and that is the angle of the back seat. So I'm just working on these, and I'm kind of moving back as I go. So you can see how everything ties into these brackets that I had built last spring. My initial idea was that this was going to be in the middle, but I realized I needed to be over just a little bit, so I'm welding it on the outside, but everything still pretty much works the same. This cross member goes across to the other side, and this piece comes up. Of course, this is angled, and kind of it forms the back seat. And as I come back, there's going to be another cross member right here that lines up with the engine tin, and that'll kind of form the back firewall. And all of this in here is going to be a floor. I might make an access hatch over top of the starter, but it's just going to be a floor that's a cargo space behind the back seat. Okay, so it's been about 3 hours, and this has taken a long time. It's just making sure things are level and square, and I came across a weird problem where the one angled support there on one side was out maybe an inch from the other side, and I think it's just a series of things not quite being square, all kind of compounded together, and I just really had to sit there and stare at it and scratch my head and figure out what was going on, and then decide, you know, how close does this actually have to be. So this top bar here is kind of the top edge of the back seat, and I'm just cutting it. I've got it, I tacked it in place, measured it for the exact width, and then realized that it needs to be a little narrower, so the angle that comes from here, there's going to be a piece of angle iron, 3/4 inch, it's going to go back. I actually want it to kind of butt up against it, so I have to take 3/4 of an inch off, which is actually works out because this ended up being maybe 1/8 of an inch too short. I wish I had like an 8-foot piece of angle iron. I only have these 5-foot pieces, but you can see there's the front door pillar comes up and comes back, and we've got the rear door pillar. So this should be square and just continue straight back. So I wish I had a piece of stock that I could clamp in place and just use as like a reference and a guide. I do have like a 6 or 7 foot piece of 3/4 inch conduit that I've been using as a straight edge. Just trying to figure this out. So again, I'm going to tack everything, and you know, I'll be able to come back and grind something out and move it if I have to. But I think I'm heading in the right direction at this point. Okay, so this is one of the pictures I pulled off the internet. If this is your Kubelwagen, let me know. This is somewhere randomly on one of the forums or something. I found some pictures of another guy fabricating a Kubel. So this gives me a good idea of what's going on the inside of this bumper, because it needs to meet the engine tin and seal up the engine compartment. So I have to fabricate kind of a drop down and then this shelf here, and also I have to kind of replicate this kind of ledge that is part of this rear bumper. You can see there's a seam there, and what happens is you unbolt this bumper and you've got access to the engine if you want to remove it for maintenance. So there's a 45-degree angle up here which is not part of the bumper. So I'm going to start with that 45-degree angle, and then I'm just going to build my shelf. And we'll see. I mean, I'm not going to replicate this exactly. This is kind of a solid box, and like I said, I went with that 1/4-inch plate, and I'm using a piece of 1x3 tubing on the top to reinforce it. At the bottom I'll probably have a piece of angle iron and some sheet steel to form these kind of wings, or these diagonal pieces here. At least that's the plan right now. I'm just going to kind of build as I go. So this is what I got here so far. That's that 1x3, or sorry, that's a 1x2 piece of tubing, just to kind of reinforce the rear bumper. And now I'm going to work on this kind of 45 and the drop down in the shelf, and that'll let me know exactly where I have to tie in, because there's a little kind of wing that gets formed on the bottom edge of this plate. Just going to take a step back and do a cardboard template. Just want to make sure I've got an idea where I'm going, what I need to do. So I always find using a bit of cardboard and mocking it up doesn't hurt. Okay, so I just cut out the plate that forms the lower part of the engine compartment, and I'm going to work on this lower deck today, and I'm just going to kind of piece it together with different pieces of metal and work my way back, and then there'll be a piece that connects it to the rear bumper. Okay, here's where I'm at. Just working on the engine bay, the lower panels. I've got a lot of it done on the one side. I kind of ran into a problem and got stumped here at the back. Wasted a lot of time monkeying around with it. Decided to just, sleep on it, and I'm going to come back to it. So then I moved on to some other stuff. I started continuing towards the rear with the framework. So measurements, I had the back sloped section, I had 22.5 inches. The top edge from that corner up to the door pillar, I had 35. And I was somewhere between 46 and 48 on the lower edge. So I'm pretty close. I'm 48 at the bottom edge. I think that might be just a little bit too long, but we're going to go with it. And the top, I don't know if that's like 36, 37. It's also a little bit long. But I was concerned about this angle, so what I did is I went to some actual Kubelwagen pictures, and I measured the back slope at about 30 degrees, give or take a degree one way or the other. So that's set right there at 30 degrees, and it gives you enough clearance for the generator pulley. I think it's going to look correct, so I'm not so worried about the top and the kind of lower measurements. The angle's right, so right now I'm happy with it. It's just a matter of trying to make sure it's square and I can actually get the same, you know, angle and measurements on the other side. That'll be the trick. Well, I'd be getting more work done on the Kubelwagen if it stopped snowing. Record month of January. So, you know, once in a while I gotta take a break from working and come out here and clear the snow. So I'm just about done the lower part of the engine compartment. Another view of what it looks like. Just kind of drops down, and this is just the simplest design I could come up with. But this gap here and this gap between this piece of plate and the engine tin is going to get covered with a rubber gasket. I'm going to come up with my own gasket, probably just some rubber stripping that I'll screw into the plate, and it will seal the engine bay. So I got to reinforce that part of the framework there with just a little bracket, and I have to build the corresponding frame on the other side. And then there's another kind of skeleton frame that works. It starts right about here and goes up and over, and then the engine compartment will actually get sealed off. So right here there's going to be an upper part, which you might call that a firewall, I don't know, but it's going to seal it off. So I'm going to work on this framework next, and then I'm going to work on using some 16 gauge that I have to actually do the 4 walls. Actually, I should say 3 sides. There's the back and the 2 sides of the upper portion of the engine compartment. Okay, so that's where I'm at. I'm working on the Kubel again today, and I just had to revisit this framework for the rear quarter panel. It was just not up to snuff, and I actually had to I cut a couple pieces too short, so I had to deal with that. That right there was cut just a little too short, and then I ended up trimming that off a little too short, and I had to add to it. But I was more concerned about getting the correct dimensions, that being 56.5 across right here, which would match the front, and making sure it was square so that at this point it was also 56.5, and at the bumper again 56.5 inches across. So it looks like I've got that all sorted out now, and I've started working on the other side, taking measurements off the passenger side. It looks like everything's going to be pretty close. I made measurements right from the front door pillar, and I was at 89.25 inches, and it looks like both sides are matching up like dead on, which is kind of a miracle that I got it that close. So I'm going to go ahead and fabricate the other side, just paying attention. The only real tricky part is making sure the 30-degree angle. And earlier I said 30 degrees. That was kind of the measurement from, you know, the point that I had, but it's actually, I would think it's either 120 degrees or 60 degrees depending on exactly how you're measuring the angle. But as you look at it, that's 60 degrees. So that's the only tricky part about the other side, but considering the width is good and the length at the top edge is good, make sure that 30 degrees is there. It's going to be pretty easy. Okay, so there's that angle. It's measured right at that point. It's 121 degrees. And over on the other side, bang on 121 degrees. Should be 120 degrees, but whatever. Close enough for me. Hey guys, I'm just going to wrap up the video here. I've got that rear end all finished up. The main framework for both sides. Really happy with the end results in terms of the measurements and how things kind of matched up. So that's good. Just for curiosity's sake, I got one of the fenders out so you guys can kind of see where this is going. Of course, it's just sitting there kind of, it needs to raise up a few inches at the back, and I think it needs to come back about 1 inch. But that's roughly where it's going to be. And you can kind of visualize where that rear quarter panel is going to kind of line up with the fender. So the next thing I'm going to be working on is completing the engine bay, which will include the firewall that comes up at the back and the two sides. It's also going to be time to think about putting in the floor for this cargo area and also finishing off the back seat. Anyways, as always, like and subscribe, leave a comment below if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.